Hello guys and girls, and welcome to today's lesson. Today we are going to continue to talk about summarizing. So far this week we have gone over the 5 rules of summarizing, and we've also talked about what should be in your summary. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how of the article. Earlier this week we did a little bit of practice in finding those things with the Festivals Around the World article that you guys read. And then yesterday you all read the Frozen Dreams text and you answered some questions about it. And then today you reviewed that text and you practiced finding the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how of that article as well. So on our screen here, I have the answer to those questions. I have who it's about, what it's about, when it happened, where it happened, why it's important, and how it happened. And now that we've talked about how to find those things, today I wanted to create a video for you all that shows how I would go about putting all of those things into a summary. Okay, so before we get into writing the summary, let's go over all of these questions. So the first question was, who is the most important subject of this passage? This question could have been a little bit tricky to answer because in Frozen Dreams, there were lots of different names that were mentioned. It talked about Matthew Henson, it talked about Robert Perry, it talked about a lot of different people. So when you're trying to find the answer to these questions, when you're writing your own summaries, you really have to think about who is the most important. Remember when we talked about main idea, we talked about finding the topic, and we said topic is just 1 or 2 words that tells what the whole passage was about. When you're trying to figure out the who or the what is the most important, you're really trying to figure out the topic. In just 1 or 2 words, who or what was this passage about? And that was Matthew Henson. The second question is, what is important about this subject? So what was so important about Matthew Henson? The answer to that question is he helped to discover the North Pole. Now, I do want you all to notice that I did not say Matthew Henson discovered the North Pole because there were several other people who were involved as well. Like I already said, Robert Perry was there, and also like it talked about in the article, that group of Inuit men. So it took all of them working together to actually find the North Pole. So I chose to say Matthew Henson helped to discover the North Pole. When did this take place? This is another one that could be kind of tricky to figure out because in the article there were lots and lots of dates. At one point it went all the way back to the 1500s, and then I think the most recent date that it mentioned was 1988. So with so many dates, it's kind of hard to know which one you should put when you're writing your summary. So you need to think about it this way. When did Matthew Henson help to discover the North Pole? And the correct answer to that was April of 1909. Where did this take place? I think the most obvious answer would be the North Pole, since that's what they discovered. But I could also see maybe wanting to include Greenland in that part because if you remember from the article, Matthew Henson and Robert Perry and the Inuits actually started in Greenland to find their route to the North Pole. So I could see how both could be considered important, but the best answer would probably be North Pole. Why is this subject important and how did it occur? These are usually the 2 that I notice students have the most trouble with, so I want to take a second to talk about it. So, why is this subject important? I like to think about it this way. Why are we still talking about Matthew Henson today? If this happened all the way back in April of 1909, why did somebody take the time to write this article about him, and why are we learning about him? So here's what I found. Henson didn't always get recognition for the discovery. He didn't get recognition until 1988. Remember, he discovered it in 1909, so this is decades later. He didn't get recognition until 1988 when he was moved to Arlington National Cemetery and was finally declared as a co-founder of the North Pole. So you have to think back to the article. Remember, Matthew Henson was African American, and because of that, he faced a lot of discrimination. So Robert Peary, when he came back after discovering the North Pole, he became like a celebrity. Everybody was talking about him, and he got all the credit. Matthew Henson and those Inuit men did not get any recognition at all. And now, finally, years and years later, somebody realized, hey, that's not okay. Robert Peary didn't do this by himself. Matthew Henson helped him. And so they finally decided in 1988 that he should get that recognition as well. But unfortunately, that was after he had passed away. So how did this occur? So the question is, how did Matthew Henson help to discover the North Pole? Like we've already talked about, it wasn't just him by himself, and it wasn't just Robert Peary by himself. In fact, like it says here, if it weren't for those Inuit men, the Inuit tribes who helped them survive by teaching them how to make shoes, helping them get across the rough terrain, they would have never made that discovery. So Henson partnered with explorer Robert Peary and several Inuit men. And remember, like we already talked about, they actually started in Greenland and they eventually found the route to the North Pole. So that is how it happened. Okay, so now that we've answered all those questions, we have to figure out how can we put all this information together into 3 or 5 sentences that tells what this passage was about. But you also have to remember that when you're writing your summaries, we have to follow our 5 rules of summarizing. Remember, we talked about these on Monday. We have to have our key words. We cannot give any personal opinions. We have to stay true to the original text, so we can't add any extra information. We are going to keep it short, so 3 to 5 sentences, and then we're going to paraphrase, which means it's going to be in our own words, and we're not going to have any quotes from the text. So what I want to do next is I want to show you all how I would go about putting all this information together into my summary. Now, chances are the best thing that you're always going to want to start with is the who or what is the most important part of this passage. So I'm going to say something in the beginning about how maybe the people who are reading this summary have never heard of Matthew Henson. If you're like me, before I read this article, I had no idea who he was. So I'm going to start off this way. Matthew Henson could be a name that you've never heard before. But did you know that he actually helped to discover the North Pole? So there's my first sentence, and in the first sentence I have already included my who and my what. It's about Matthew Henson, and he helped to discover the North Pole. So that leaves my when, where, why, and how. So here's what I'm going to use for my second sentence. Let's include our when. In April of 1909, and I think this would be a good place to go ahead and put our how as well. Henson partnered with the explorer. Notice, guys, I'm copying this straight from my sentence up here. Robert Peary and several Inuit men to find a route from Greenland to the North Pole. Okay, so we have our who and our what, we have our when, we have our where, and we have our how. So now we have to include why is this subject important. I didn't talk about this when I did my why up here, but I do want to make sure I mention here about the history and how Henson was African American. So here's what I'm going to say. Henson was African American, and because of this, didn't get recognition for helping to make the discovery. Put a period there. And then now let's talk about how eventually he was moved to Arlington National Cemetery. We'll say, but finally, in 1988, Henson was moved to Arlington National Cemetery and was officially named a co-founder of the North Pole. Okay, let's look over this and make sure that we have included everything and we followed our 5 rules. Matthew Henson could be a name that you've never heard before, but did you know that he actually helped to discover the North Pole? So in this sentence, we have our who, we have where it happened, the North Pole, and we have what Matthew Henson did. He helped to discover the North Pole. Okay, in April 1909, there's our when. Henson partnered with the explorer Robert Peary and several Inuit men to find a route from Greenland to the North Pole. So there is our how he did it. And now here at the end, we're going to include our why. Why is it important? Henson was African American, and because of this, didn't get recognition for helping make the discovery. But finally, in 1988, Henson was moved to Arlington National Cemetery and was officially named a co-founder of the North Pole. Okay, guys, notice that altogether we wrote 4 sentences. So that article that was 3 or 4 pages long, we have condensed it down. We've talked about the most important parts, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We've included our key words. We didn't give any specific quotes from the text. It's all paraphrased. So this is how you write a correctly written summary. We are going to be doing more practice with this in the future, but for now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.